Shalom, my dear friends, Shalom and Shavuot Tov from the holy city of Jerusalem. I understand that not everybody is at the moment getting the video. Everything is working at my end. Those of you who are watching the video on YouTube directly, I'd be really grateful if you would be kind enough to sign in if you can to the Azamra chat room. And the Azamra chat room runs independently of YouTube. So before we do begin today's classes, let's try to establish why things are not working. And let me just say a good morning to everybody, or good afternoon, or good evening, wherever you are. And let us hope that soon we'll be able to get up and running with today's discussion. So anybody who is tuned into YouTube to watch this, please let me know if you are able to see me and hear me at the moment. And if things are not going as they ought to be, then I'll have to delay until some more people do indicate. Let's see what's happening here in the chat room. Waiting for some responses here from those who are signed into Azamra Online Bet Midrash, which is accessed from the Azamra website, and just waiting to hear responses. And just as soon as I do hear positive responses that you can actually hear me, then I will get into today's discussion. So please just waiting for some responses for those of you in the online Bet Midrash chat room. Well, our chat room facility is working. It appears that our video and audio coming via YouTube is not at the moment working for everybody. I'll be very grateful to anybody who can see and hear me on YouTube to please, via azamra.org website on the live class page, sign into the online Bet Midrash chat. And if you can see me and hear me and can get into the chat, then it does indicate that things are going out okay from here in Jerusalem. So I'm waiting now to hear from anybody about what's happening. So waiting for responses. Trying to get some response from those in the chat room to see if they are able to see and hear me via YouTube. And this is all min hashamayim, it's all from the heavens that this is happening. There appears to be some break between the internet in Israel and that in still trying to converse here via our online chat, and it is good that I'm able to speak to at least somebody. Seems to we're able to communicate on the chat, and still waiting to see if you can hear me on the see me on the YouTube. So I'm actually broadcasting from one computer and also getting the YouTube feed via YouTube. I'm just like to try on the Zama website. I'm actually broadcasting from one computer and also getting the YouTube feed via YouTube. I'm just like to try on the Zama. I am getting a message on the Zama website that the YouTube is not available via the Zama website. So if you are going directly to the broadcasting Zama channel on YouTube, you should be able to get the YouTube feed via YouTube. I'm just like to try on the Zama. I am getting a message on the Zama website that the YouTube is not available via the Zama website. So if you are going directly to the Zama channel on YouTube, you should be able to get the YouTube feed via YouTube. I'm just like to try on the Zama. I am getting a message on the Zama website that the YouTube is not available via the Zama website. So if you are going directly to the Zama channel on YouTube, you should be able to get the YouTube via YouTube. I'm just like to try on the Zama. I am getting a message on the Zama website that the YouTube is not available via the Zama website. So if you are going directly to the Zama channel on YouTube, you should be able to get the YouTube via YouTube. I'm just like to So let some technical difficulties. There was some error in the coding on Zamra website because the embedded video destination had somehow been changed without my realizing it. But if you do wish to view today's stream through a Zamra website on the live class page, you should be able to now. And likewise, the stream is running through YouTube. So I have two dear friends in the Zamra online Bet Midrash who are with me, and I've got confirmation from one of you that you can hear me and see me. And as soon as I get confirmation from the second, then I will like to begin today's class. And I do request anybody who's tuned in on YouTube and who is not signed into the online Bet Midrash, I'd be most grateful if you would sign in through the online Bet Midrash, and that way we can communicate in the chat and you can let me know if there's any problems with the programming today. So I have a message from Adonit that she can hear and see me, and waiting now for our dear friend Catherine just to have confirmation from you. And if so, I will begin today's Daniel class, our class of Mikra, our class of the Tanakh. So just waiting until I do get confirmation from Catherine there on the online chat. It's been quite a little harrowing. There are many worse things in life than this, but it's very precious to know that we can communicate one with the other across so many thousands of miles. And just waiting now for confirmation that indeed the audio is getting through. Just let's wait for a moment until we hear that everybody can hear the audio. So just waiting now for confirmation that you can see me and hear me on YouTube. And just as soon as I do get that confirmation, I'm going to begin. Baruch Hashem, we seem to be up and running. Shalom, today, the 24th day of the month of Elul of this year of redemption 5776, corresponding to the 28th of August. I made a mistake about the Hebrew month. Let me say that again, 24th of Av. We are still in Menachem Av. I'm a month ahead in my thoughts and always looking towards the future. The 24th of Av of the year 5176. So let's start all that over again. Shalom, today the 28th day of the month of Menachem Av of this year 5776, this year of redemption corresponding to the 28th of August of the year 2016. And I'm now going to begin with our study of Chapter 9 of the book of Daniel, which is a rather different kind of content for much of the chapter than the content that we have had in the last two chapters, and indeed the content we've had from the beginning of the book. The earlier part of the book that was written in the Aramaic language mostly was narrative and the dreams and visions of others, of Nebuchadnezzar, and the episode of the writing on the wall with Belshazzar, and the conspiracy against Daniel in the time of Darius the Mede when he was thrown into the lion's den. And then from chapters 7 and 8, we went, 7 was in Aramaic, 8 in Hebrew, and we were in visions that Daniel was shown. But now in chapter 9, we see a different side of... We're now moving to chapter 9. We see a different aspect of Daniel. We'd already heard earlier on in the book that Daniel would go to his chamber every day to go down on his knees and pray to God in the direction of Jerusalem. And that was what led to his being thrown into the lion's den for defying the decree of Darius, the king of Media, whose ministers made him pass the decree that nobody may make any requests except of the king. Well, so we have established that Daniel was one that prayed, but we have not yet, until this new chapter, had such a beautiful depiction of the actual content of Daniel's prayers. And the prayers which are contained in our present chapter have diction that is so eloquent that there are many phrases which are included in the liturgy of the Siddur. And it's particularly true in the section of the prayers known as the Tachanun. After we have said our morning blessings and recited the sacrificial passages and followed that with the recital of the Psalms and the songs of the verses of song, and after we have recited the blessings before the saying of the Shema Yisrael, affirmation of faith, when we've completed the blessing after that, we go into the Shmona Esrei, the prayer of originally 18 blessings, now 19 blessings, the climax of which is the closing blessing, the blessing of Sim Shalom, place peace upon your nation, upon the people of Israel, and all of the accompanying blessings. And immediately after that section of the service, which is recited while standing, the Shmona Esrei prayer is also known as the Amidah prayer, specifically to be recited standing. There is then directly after that, without a break, on most weekdays, the section called the Tachanun, the entreaty, which is also known as Nefilat Apayim, falling upon our face, which in ancient times was performed by people actually prostrating in the temple. And if they recited the prayers in a synagogue, they would put straw or fabric carpeting over the floor, since it's forbidden to prostrate on stone anywhere except in the temple. And the prostration today is formed symbolically by our resting our head on our shoulder in this manner, lowering the head over the shoulder. And if a person is wearing their tefillin on their left arm, they would not fall upon the straps of the tefillin usually, but they would fall on the other side. And prayers of supplication for the terrible shame and degradation of the people of Israel in this time of exile, which is a degradation of the divine presence in the world, the Shekhinah. All of this is expressed in the prayers accompanying the Nefilat Apayim, the falling on our faces in the Tachanun. And as I say, many of the phrases come from Daniel's prayer in chapter 9. Well, now, the occasion of chapter 9, and once again we have to return to the chronology of the book of Daniel, we get at the opening verse of chapter 9, Bishnat Achat Lador Yovesh, in the first year of Darius. And now he's called Darius ben Achashverosh, Darius the son of Achashverosh Mizera Modoi, from the seed of Medea, Asher Homlach al Malchus Kasdim, that was made king over the empire of the Kasdim, the Chaldeans. Now, in calling Darius the son of Achashverosh, we must not let ourselves become confused and think that this is the son of Ahasuerus, Ahasuerus, who is known to us from the scroll of Esther, because the name of Ahasuerus is a generic name for the monarchs of the twin kingdoms of Persia and Media. And the Darius we are talking about is the same Darius that, as it says in our verse, conquered the Chaldeans, that is the Babylonians, which was described to us earlier in the book of Daniel, in the chapter about the writing on the wall in at the feast of Belshazzar. And the very concluding verse of chapter 5 describes how on that night, chapter 5 verse 30, that night Belshazzar was killed. Well, Belshazzar had reigned for 3 years, and we had in our chapter 8 Daniel's prophecy, his vision from the 3rd year of Belshazzar, and the previous chapter, chapter 7, had come from the 1st year of Belshazzar. So we see these visions were coming, or these matters were coming thick and fast. Chapter 7, the vision of the 4 beasts in the 1st year of Belshazzar. Then chapter 8, the further elucidation of the vision by the angels coming in the 3rd year of Belshazzar, the very year that Belshazzar was killed by the Medes. And here already in chapter 9 we are in the 1st year of Dariavesh, which is immediately consecutive to the fall of the Babylonians under Belshazzar. And the date is very significant, and the reason is that this year that Babylon fell to Persia and Media was actually the 70th year since Nebuchadnezzar of Babylon had first begun his business with Jerusalem. In the 1st year of Nebuchadnezzar's reign, he had risen up against Nineveh, the capital of Assyria, and he had sacked Nineveh, and so Nebuchadnezzar was already king over Babylon that had conquered Assyria. The 2nd year was when Nebuchadnezzar first went up to Jerusalem, and he took the king in exile. Now Jeremiah, who was prophesying throughout that period until the destruction of King Solomon's temple, Jeremiah had prophesied that the empire of Babylon would survive only 70 years. And this is explicitly stated in our chapter here, chapter 9, where Daniel tells us that he has been calculating how long is this exile supposed to go on. Verse 2 of chapter 9. Bishnas Achas Lemolchoi, in the 1st year of his ruling, that is Dariavesh, the king of Media, Ani Daniel binoisi basforim. I, Daniel, set my intelligence to seek to understand. Here the Hebrew word binoisi is related to the root bina, understanding. He's trying to calculate and understand basfarim, in the books. The word sfarim carries a double meaning here. We would refer it to written scrolls of Hebrew texts, but given that each word of every Hebrew text is made up of letters that are ciphers, that is numbers, the word sfarim is related also to numerology. He was using prophetic and Kabbalistic numerology to understand where we were in time in relation to Jeremiah's prophecy. Mispar Ashonim, he's calculating the number of the years. Asher oyo devar Hashem el Yirmiyo Hanovi, from the time when there was the word of Hashem to the prophet Jeremiah. Asher oyo devar Hashem, that there was the word of the Lord, el Yirmiyo Hanovi, to Yirmiyo, Jeremiah the priest, lemalois, to fill up lechorvois Yerushalayim, to fulfill the period of Jerusalem's destruction, Shiv'im Shono, 70 years. And here on this verse, Rashi tells us what was the perplexity of Daniel. We shall actually get to the bottom line of this calculation, and everyone had miscalculated. Everybody thought that Babylon would survive only 70 years from the time of Nebuchadnezzar's first coming into Jerusalem to take the king into exile, which was 18 years before the destruction of King Solomon's temple. So they got it wrong, because the 70 years was supposed to run from the actual destruction of the temple. Only at the end of 70 years from that date would the new temple be rebuilt. At the end of 70 years from Nebuchadnezzar's first entry into Jerusalem, which was when Daniel is now making his calculations, this was actually the time as soon as not Darius the Mede, but his successor Cyrus gave the green light for the exiles to go back to Jerusalem. This is 1 year after the present prophecy, but when Zerubbabel and Yehoshua the high priest did go up to Jerusalem with Cyrus' green light, as described at the beginning of Ezra, they were not able to do more than lay the foundations of the temple. There was another 18 very eventful years before the temple could be built. The main event that we are familiar with that occurred during those 18 years was the miracle of Purim. And it was after the miracle of Purim that the successor of Achashverosh of Purim fame, namely Darius the second, Darius of Persia, he then gave the green light to actually go ahead with the building of the temple, and it was built indeed at that time. So there were several prophets that were active in this time frame. Mordechai, of course, of Megillah Esther fame, was a Baal Ruach HaKodesh. He was had Holy Spirit and prophecy. Likewise, the prophet Zechariah and the prophets Haggai and Malachi were active. And indeed, already before this prophecy, quite a long time before the downfall of Belshazzar, Ezekiel, who was prophesying in Babylon, who had gone to Babylon with the exiles from Jerusalem under Jechoniah, which is referred to again in Megillat Esther, Ezekiel, who was prophesying some years after the destruction of the first temple and quite a few years before Daniel's present prayer and vision. Ezekiel had already prophesied the whole ultimate restoration of the end of time from Ezekiel chapter 40 onwards. That is time stamped at the beginning of chapter 40 when Ezekiel began the prophecy about the future temple. The timestamp is quite a few years after the destruction of Solomon's temple and sometime before Daniel's present prophecy. So Daniel's main concern in this chapter is to establish when is the exile to be restored, and he has a very important characteristic Israelite response to the exile. We find today numerous peoples who feel that they have been historically the victims of great injustice. be it the blacks, be it the Muslims, be it other peoples that feel they've been victims of some kind of injustice, are intent on blaming everybody except themselves for their perceived injustice. And here in Daniel's chapter now, we see that Daniel blames nobody except ourselves. Daniel, in order to understand the predicament of the people of Israel at this time of exile, he turns to God in repentance. Here he is, a figure that undoubtedly was a perfect tzaddik, as we see indeed in Ezekiel's comparison of Daniel with Noah and with Job. Daniel was seen as, it comes out in our present chapter, as the Ish Chamudot, the man of the pleasant delights, the delights of spirituality, the chosen beloved of God. And so he was undoubtedly a tzaddik, and the prayer that Daniel expresses in our chapter is a prayer of the tzaddik hador, of the outstanding tzaddik of the generation, or one of them, undoubtedly Daniel, even with his companions of Mordechai and Haggai and Zechariah and the other great people of that generation, was undoubtedly one of, if not the tzaddik hador. He'd seen it all. He'd gone through troubles. He'd gone through every kind of test, and here he is with the utmost humility, chastising himself with fasting and presenting himself as being one of the guilty, putting words of eloquence into the mouths of all Israel in his prayer for God to turn to us. So that will be our introduction to the study of this chapter of Daniel, and with the help of God, in the next session we will go into the text of this chapter and discuss the implications of the text, and we will pay particular attention to the end of the chapter, when we have once again prophecies and highly obscure references to the end of time. So with that, today I'm going to conclude this section of our study and of Tanakh. We'll just take a very short break, and then we will come to our study of the Mishnah. Shalom, back again now with the next segment of our studies, which is the Mishnah of Sanhedrin, chapter 9, continuing from where we left off. So without further ado, let me turn to our study of the Mishnah. Shalom, today, the 24th day of the month of Menachem Av of this year of redemption, the year 5776, corresponding to the 28th of August of the year 2018. And we continue with our study of the tractate Sanhedrin, Masechet Sanhedrin, starting with chapter 9 now, where we left off at the beginning now of Mishnah 4, Mishnah Dalet. We had already discussed in the previous Mishnah the question of which is the order of severity of the four kinds of execution given over to the Bet Din, the Sanhedrin. And we had seen that although Rabbi Shimon held that burning was more serious than stoning and decapitation more and strangling was more serious than burning than beheading, the agreed view of the majority of sages as the most serious is skila, stoning. The second most serious is sreifo, burning. The third is hereg, harigo, execution, killing by the sword. And the fourth is chenek, strangulation, suffocation. So now the next question is, what if a person had performed one action or more that led him to being liable to two different kinds of execution? Mishin is chayiv b'shtei misois beis din. Somebody that became liable to two forms of execution, two deaths of the beis din. Nidoin b'chamuro. He is judged or condemned to the more stringent of the two. Ovar avero sheyesh bo shtei misois nidoin b'chamuro. If he had done one action that carried the penalty of two separate death penalties, because the one action was in violation of more than a single Torah prohibition, nidoin b'chamuro, he is going to be condemned to suffer the more stringent of the penalties. Rabbi Yosef Omer, Rabbi Yosef tells us a different view. Nidoin beziko orishono shebo'o olav. He is judged by the first. Ziko is a connection or a bond, the first obligation to be executed that came upon him through his actions. For example, if somebody had transgressed a less severe sin and he had received his condemnation for the punishment for that sin, and then he carried out a more stringent, serious transgression, you might have thought that since he had already been condemned to death with the lesser penalty, that he is like a dead person, and therefore his subsequent action involving a more stringent penalty is not an action, because he says it we're already dead. So the Mishnah is telling us that this is not the case, and in the case where one single action carries two penalties, this would be, for example, if a person had relations with his mother-in-law at a time when she was married to another man, he is liable to the penalty of burning for relations with his mother-in-law, and he would be liable to strangulation for any woman that was married and he had committed adultery with her. So here these two penalties of sreifo, burning, and chenek, strangulation, fall at the same time, and our Mishnah is telling us that according to the Tanakama, the first opinion, he would be judged by the more stringent. So now turning to Mishnah 5 of chapter 9 of Sanhedrin. This is now no longer speaking about the death penalty. This Mishnah is talking about somebody who has been subject to the penalty of lashes, the 39 lashes that are administered to a person who committed any of the prohibitions of the Torah. Mi sheloko v'shono, somebody had been given the punishment of stripes already, Vishana, he did it again. He committed the same action again. There is a particular class of prohibitions, the violation of which carries the penalty of stripes. Any action that is in violation of one of the prohibitions of the Torah may carry the penalty of stripes, with very few exceptions, the penalty of lashes. But our Mishnah, according to Harav Ovadia Mibartanur, is specifically talking about one of those prohibitions in the Torah that carries the penalty of karet. And that is the penalty of excision of the soul. These are the more serious of the prohibitions, with the exception of those that carry the actual death penalty by the Sanhedrin, by the court. But there are transgressions that carry the penalty of karet, of excision, without being liable to the death penalty. For example, a person who had relations with their sister or brother would carry the penalty of karet, even though it's not specifically punishable by death by the Beis Din. Well, if they performed that deed and then they did it over again, what more can you do if they're not going to respond to having these very terrible and debilitating 39 lashes? Beis Din machnisin oison lakipo. The court put them into a kippah, that is a confined cell. A kippah is the word we use today for the head covering that males use in the synagogue and at many times of the day, as opposed to a formal hat, just a kind of a cap without a rim. But a kippah could also mean a dome, and here we're talking about a very small dome in which the person is in a confined solitary confinement. They feed him with barley seeds until his stomach splits. Those who are familiar with the history of the Second World War know that what the Japanese used to do with their starving prisoners of war was to feed them with rice seeds, and then they were so thirsty they would drink lots of water and the rice would swell in their insides and they would simply die the most agonizing death. And this is what is going to be administered to this person that is a recidivist, that he does not accept the chastisement of the Beis Din. And now the second part of this Mishnah, Hahoireg nefesh sheloi be'edim. If somebody killed a soul, he killed a person, adult or child, not in the presence of witnesses. And in such a case, he could not be condemned to the usual penalty for willful murder, that is decapitation. So here we see how the court is entrusted with a sanction even where the necessary conditions of testimony are not present. Somebody had killed another person not with witnesses present, machnisin oisoi la kippah. He too is put into this kippah, this solitary confinement. They would feed him with lechem tsar, bread that is narrow, in other words, a very limited diet of bread. Umayim lachatz, water of lachatz. The word lachatz means pressure, a minimum of water. And our commentators say that this end part of the Mishnah is actually related to what we learned at the beginning part of the Mishnah about feeding the person with barley. The end part of the Mishnah is telling us how they would treat him at first. They'd give him this a very limited diet until his stomach actually shrinks. And that's after that when they're going to feed him with the barley and let him drink water, and the barley will swell and he will die this agonizing death. So this is the two parts of the Mishnah complement one another. And now we come to Mishnah Vav, the sixth Mishnah. And once again, we're talking about exceptional kinds of death penalties. Hagoinev es hakasvo. If somebody steals that thing that is called the kasvo, which is one of the ministering vessels of the temple, that's a very serious offense to steal one of the utensils used in the temple services. V'hamakalel b'kusim, somebody who gave a curse against another Israelite using a kosem, a magician. It was precisely this that Balak wanted to do against Israel when he summoned Bilam, the pagan prophet, with kesamim, with magical sorcery, a paraphernalia. And then the third sin that is going to be punishable by the following penalty is that haboyel aramis, literally one who has intimate relations with an aramis. The word aramis literally refers to a non-Israelite Aramean woman. However, throughout the Mishnah, the expression aramis refers to any non-Israelite woman. Somebody who does one of these above transgressions, they would not wait to take them through judicial procedure. Kanoyin poigin boy, the zealots would attack that person. These three offenses, the offense of stealing dedicated temple vessels, the offense of using a pagan sorcerer to curse somebody's enemy, and somebody who would commit the complete opposite of the holy covenant with Israel, which is that of moral and sexual purity, and flagrantly like Zimri, the prince of the tribe of Shimon, when he had relations with the Midianite princess Cosby, just like Pinchas attacked that couple, so too Kanoyan, the zealous, and of which Pinchas in Book of Numbers was an example. Pinchas, poigin boy, they would attack this person. They themselves would strike the blow, and they would not go to the Besdin, to the court, to ask permission. If they went to the Besdin would have to answer them that you're not allowed to do that. But if they went ahead and did it, then the deed was done. They exacted this vindictive punishment against these offenses. Kohen sheshimesh batumo, a priest that served in the temple in a state of impurity. He was a priest that was rendered defiled, whether it was through contact with a dead body or through having contact with one of the creatures that confers defilement. If a person touches a dead mouse or certain kinds of dead lizards, the Torah tells us that they are tamei, they are defiled. Various other kinds of tum'ah, if the priest had a morbid discharge from his member or some other symptom of leprosy, tzara'at. If he then went into the temple and served, which is strictly forbidden, ein echov hakohanim mevim oisoi levezdin. His brothers, the priests, would not bring him to the bezdin, to the court. Elo pirchei chehuna, but the flowers of the priesthood, that is to say, those young priests who have their beards are beginning to sprout on their chins and on their faces. These are strong 18, 20-year-olds. Pirchei kahuna moitzin oisoi chutz lo azoro. These young priests would take that offender outside of the inner temple courtyard where the sacrifices and other temple services were performed. Umaftzin es moichoi begezirin. They would smash his brain with axes. A pretty gruesome and awful end, and this shows us the extreme severity of this this offense. Another interpretation given by the Bartanura of gezirin. Gezirin would be big logs of wood. These would be available in the temple for the temple wood fire, and I would say this is the more likely meaning of the word gezirin, these blocks of wood there that they would use to smash that person's brain. Zor sheshimish bamigdosh, literally a stranger, that is to say, one who is not a Kohen priest. Zor, a stranger that served in the temple. Rabbi Akiva oimer b'chenek. Rabbi Akiva holds that he is liable to execution by the Bet Din through strangulation. V'chachomim oimrim b'dei shomayim. The other sages say that the death of this individual would occur not through the earthly Bet Din, not through the earthly court, but it will be at the hands of heaven, because the Torah tells us by a non-Kohen that serves in the temple, that is in book of Numbers chapter 17, that he must die. Everybody who comes close to the sanctuary of the Lord except for a Kohen shall die. And we learn from another source in the Chumash that the death in question would be at the hands of heaven, and there are a number of other punishments. A number of other sins are in a similar category, and there is distinction between death at the hands of heaven and the other term we encountered earlier today, the sin that is punishable through karet, the penalty of excision. Death at the hands of heaven means that the person will die early in this world. Karet means excision of the soul not only in this world but also in the next world. That is to say that a person who has committed a sin punishable through karet will lose his world to come. However, if the person undergoes the penalty of lashes, that itself is sufficient to remove the penalty of karet. So one who has performed one of these transgressions but then received the lashes, they would not lose their share in the world to come. And with these closing concepts in chapter 9, we are prepared for the next very famous chapter of this tractate of Sanhedrin, the chapter 10, which is known as the chapter of Chelek, which discusses those souls that have a share in the life of the world to come, and those transgressions and those famous sinners of Israelite history that have no share in the world to come. So with that, we will conclude with today's Mishnah study and take a very short interval, and I'll be back with some interesting discussion of Chassidut in just a few minutes.
Shabbos Menucha Kol HaMizanegim HaMizanegim Bo Kol HaMizanegim HaMizanegim Bo Yizku L'Eloi V'Simecho Kol HaMizanegim HaMizanegim Bo Kol HaMizanegim HaMizanegim Bo Yizku L'Eloi V'Simecho Pedosainos atzmiya, Pedosainos atzmiya, Pedosainos atzmiya, Benos Yogoin v'Anocho, Pedosainos atzmiya, Pedosainos atzmiya, Pedosainos atzmiya, Pedosainos atzmiya. Benos Yogoin v'Anocho V'Hizanei v'Sanogim B'avonos lo v'dogim V'Hizanei v'Sanogim B'avonos lo Lehisaneg v'sanogim Lehisaneg v'sanogim Lehisaneg v'sanogim Barburim oslo v'dogim Lehisaneg v'sanogim Lehisanei v'sanogim Barburim oslo v'dogim Nay na nay na 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 na
Shalom, back again now with continuing with our program today, and we now come to the third segment of today's studies after what's been somewhat stressful time over here because of initial difficulties in people's being able to connect, but now we have. And yesterday's portion that we read in the synagogue, the portion of Ekev, is about the distinctive wonder of the Holy Land of Israel. And among the one of the praises of the land of Israel is that Asher lo b'miskenus tochlu lechem, a land where not through your being impoverished shall you eat bread. Bread is the staple food, or has traditionally been the staple food of humanity, and while regular people eat bread and poor people eat bread, the wealthy have gone on to all kinds of other foods which they consider to be more healthy and more satisfying, and all kinds of other reasons. So Israel are blessed in the land of Israel not to be in a state of poverty, but even so eat bread. And the reason is because over bread one makes the grace, birkat hamazon, the blessings to the creator of the universe for our food, in a fuller and more extensive way than we make blessings over any other food other than bread. And therefore, when a God-fearing Israelite eats bread and recites the requisite blessings before the bread and after the bread, this is actually an act of service in the very home. The table of the person has become an altar, and the subject of eating is one of great depth with very many spiritual ramifications, and the levels of consciousness that we are blessed with are very much bound up with the not only what we eat, which should be kosher, but also and nutritious, but also the way in which we eat it. We should eat and consume our food in a holy and a dignified manner, and this is expressed in the Torah itself in a verse in book of Deuteronomy chapter 23, which tells us that in verse 25, if you come into the vineyard of your fellow, you may eat grapes according to your desire, until your satisfaction, but don't put them in your basket to take away out of the field. Now, this is not talking about somebody who's happens to be passing through somebody else's vineyard. For a person passing through another person's vineyard to take grapes, to casually eat them, would be considered to be an act of theft or robbery. But the Torah gives permission to a person who is employed, who is being paid to do work in somebody else's vineyard, besides their wages, also to eat some of the grapes. And the same applies to other crops that people are involved in harvesting. They're permitted to eat from the produce in the field during their time of work, but not allowed to take it away with them someplace else. They're not allowed to collect the owner's food and take it for their own consumption elsewhere. That is what this verse, Deuteronomy chapter 23, verse 25, is telling us. When you come into the vineyard of your fellow, you may eat, that is, as a laborer, you may eat the grapes as much as you wish, but until you are satisfied, but don't put them into your basket. Rabbi Nachman has a very interesting discussion of some allusions of this verse contained in a short piece in his master work Likutei Moharan, which contains in the first part in teaching number 257 Reish Nun Zayin, the following teaching on this verse. And the occasion for this was because it appears that Rabbi Nachman's mother had left him instructions in her will that somebody that he could not stand, they should not allow to be with him, not allow to come near him, people that he literally could not stand. And if not, he was going to be in need of help from far off places to save him from these people who are near at hand, who are causing him anguish. So we hear a little more, we do not hear more about this particular episode and what occasioned it, but Rabbi Nachman, commenting on this, made a very fascinating comment about people who eat more than they require. It is on Shabbat and festivals a mitzvah to eat, and so too at feasts of a mitzvah like a circumcision feast or the marriage feast of Chatan and Kala, a groom and his bride, and some other occasions of mitzvah, the feast of a bar mitzvah. But when a person in his mundane or her mundane eating consumes more than they should, then some difficult, harsh consequences follow, as he explains on the basis of this verse. He says, when a person eats more than they need, this extra food harms the person. And the reason is, as Rabbi Nachman now explains, because everything in creation has a root from which the thing in question derives its vitality. For example, medicines have vitality in virtue of the fact that they can provide healing to the person that takes them. In other words, God has provided medicinal herbs with their powers for the sake of man to be able to have their benefit. And thus it is that the medicinal herbs are rooted in the will of God to provide man with what he needs. And so it is with all things. And likewise, the reason why foods have their vitality is in virtue of the fact that God has given the foods this vitality, because these foods are needed for man to eat, and humans receive vitality from the foods, and that's why God has put vitality into these foods. This is alluded to, not stated here in the teaching, but alluded to in our blessing after foods other than bread or fruits of the land of Israel, wine and grain foods. But after eating something like eggs or drinking beverages other than wine, we say the blessing, "Blessed are you, King of the universe, Boreh nefashot rabot v'chesronan," who has created many different souls and their needs. Al kol ma sheboros olachayus b'am nefesh kol chai, over everything that you have created to give sustenance, to give vitality to the soul of all living. Baruch Chei Ha'olamim, blessed is the life of the world. So we see in this blessing express what Rabbi Nachman is saying here, that God has put vitality into the foods for the sake of the creatures that are sustained by those foods. And Rabbi Nachman continues to say, when a person eats more than that person actually needs, and again, I emphasize this is not talking about the eating of Shabbat, which is a mitzvah, Shabbat festivals, and the Su'udah Shel Mitzvah, a feast of a mitzvah. Let's talk about people who eat to excess unnecessarily. He says this food has no place from which to receive vitality. since the person has no need for this food. And it's as if the person has put the food into a vessel, into a basket, and the food certainly does not receive vitality from just being there, useless in the basket. And what happens is that the food is seeking out vitality for itself, to give vitality to itself, because it's not getting vitality through providing the individual with the nutrition that person really needs. So the food is useless and is asking for some purpose to be there. And what happens is that where does this food, this unnecessary food, get its vitality from? From the person that ate it to excess. In other words, this food starts sucking the vitality of the person. And as a result of this, this food actually harms the person. And this can have the consequence that because this is harming the person, even the other foods join up with this food and they all start harming the person. And that is what the verse in Deuteronomy is telling us, Deuteronomy chapter 23, verse 25, which says, when you come into the vineyard of your fellow, you may eat the grapes, kenafshecho sove'echo, kenafshecho, according to the desire of your soul, sove'echo, to your satisfaction, not to excess, but to a point that is sufficient to leave you satisfied. And the verse continues, the last words of the verse, ve'el kelyecho lo yisitein, into your basket you shall not put the food, into your vessel, your basket, don't put the extra unnecessary food. Says Rabbi Nachman, this verse is may be used as a source for the teaching we have heard that you should eat to your satisfaction, but don't tuck away extra food into your basket, and because this, God forbid, can lead to harm. So the verse says, don't put it into your basket, don't eat more than you actually need, because that will be like somebody putting the food into the basket since he doesn't actually need the food. So with this, let us conclude our studies for this Kollel section of today's broadcasts, and with the help of God, I'll be back in a little over a half an hour with our weekly Shavuot Tov hookup, and I would like to invite anybody who does have any questions you'd like to put to me for discussion in today's Shavuot Tov hookup to either email me through the Azamra website contact form, or tune into, log into the Azamra online Bet Midrash, and there you'll be able to chat live with me in real time through instant messaging and to put any other questions you may have to me. With that, I wish you, for now, a good day, and we'll be back with the Kollel studies of Nach, Hebrew Bible, Mishnah, and Torah Inspiration tomorrow at 4 p.m. Israel time. And we'll be continuing here today at 6 p.m. Israel time with the Shavuot Tov hookup.
Shabbos menucha, kol hamisargim bo, kol hamisargim bo, yizkor eloy v'simecho, kol hamisargim bo, kol hamisargim bo, yizkor eloy v'simecho. Yotzoro Perusainos atzmia, perusainos atzmia, perusainos atzmia, perusainos atzmia, venos yogain vianocho, perusainos atzmia, perusainos atzmia, perusainos atzmia. Perusainos atzmia, venos yogain vianocho, lehisanai v'sanogim ba'avonos lov'dogim, lehisanai v'sanogim Vamos lov'dogim, lehisanai v'sanogim, lehisanai v'sanogim, lehisanai v'sanogim, barboremos lov'dogim, lehisanai v'sanogim, lehisanai v'sanogim, barboremos lov'dogim. Nay na nay na 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 la la